John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to Episode 5 of the Heroes and Legends audio podcast. It's been a while since we've had an episode, actually. We've had so much going on the news front as far as announcement week and then all the Hour of Devastation previews and such, that I haven't had a chance to just sit down and talk casually with y'all about what's going on in the world of Magic. That's what this podcast is about. It's a casual conversation. We're just going to talk about some of the hot topics right now. I always love to hear your comments and thoughts in the comment section below as well. Typically when I do these podcasts, we have 3 different topics. 2 of them usually Magic related. The third one, I try to pick something that's just another interest of mine. Today, though, we're going to go with all 3 Magic because there's been a lot happening. We haven't talked in a while. 3 topics I want to talk about today. The first one being the one everyone's talking about this week. Friday Night Magic promos and the fact they're going away and how I feel about it. So we'll talk about that. Secondly, I want to talk about the quality issues that some folks are having when it comes to opening packs of Magic, especially for the Amonkhet Kaladesh blocks. And we'll talk about what Wizards can do about that, how they're handling it, and maybe what the right approach is going forward. And then finally, third topic, we'll talk about something positive. We're going to talk about the Star City Games Open Cincinnati, which was awesome, and hopefully is a foreshadow of good things to come for the standard format. Now, let's get into it with that first topic. We're going to start right off with the big one, Friday Night Magic promos. All right, now, a lot of content creators have been talking about this. A lot of people have opinions about this. For the most part, I'm pretty much in line with everyone else's opinion. It's a takeaway. It doesn't feel good. You don't want feel bads to happen too often to your player base, or else you start to lose your player base. And this is definitely a feel bad. What I'm going to do today, though, is I want to talk about this from maybe a little bit of a different point of view that everyone else is talking about it from. I, being somebody who worked for a major entertainment company for 20 years, I kind of know some of the things that go on behind the scenes sometimes, and I'm going to try to get into Wizards' head a little bit on this one, and we'll talk about that in detail. But first, if you're not familiar with what's going on, if you've been unplugged for about a week or so from the internet, Wizards released an article on Sunday. They did a follow-up article early this week talking about the changes to organized play incentives in LGSs. Most of the changes were great, actually. I'll give you a quick recap, and I'm also going to link in the description below the 2 articles that are relevant, so if you want to check them out for yourself, definitely do so. But a quick recap of the good stuff. They are adding a promo to league events. So if you play in leagues, you'll also get a promo now. That's pretty awesome. They're adding a promo to the Magic Open House events that they have, which, if you're not familiar with those, they encourage experienced players to bring newer players to learn the game so that the following week would be the pre-release. They can go to the pre-release. You will get a card to incentivize that program as well now, a new promo card. So that's pretty cool. The promo card will actually be from the new set that will be coming out within the next few weeks every time. This starts with Ixalan, by the way. So that's kind of cool. You get a card from the new set before you really would have had a chance otherwise to do so. All right. That's great. Standard Showdown packs, getting a little bit of a mini upgrade. Instead of just the full art land cards we've been getting, that will be replaced by a foil basic land. In this case, from a land that has never been printed in foil before. They're using the Rebecca Gway series of basic lands that were in Commander 2016 products, which look amazing, by the way. So that's a nice upgrade. I would argue that's going to be hard to maintain the excitement around something like that, because I mean, you can do that this time. Maybe next time you do one of the other sets from Commander 2016. There were 2 other good cycles that they could do from that product. Eventually, that maybe starts to get stale, but at least for right now, I think that's actually pretty awesome. So those are all positives. There's another change coming to Game Day. This one is semi-positive, semi-weird to me. Game Day is changing to the Store Championship. Now, the big changes you'll notice, the biggest change you'll notice, is the fact that it's changing from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. This is weird to me, because I feel like it's in a good spot right now. Like, you're starting to get past, like, the pre-release excitement and the launch day excitement. And then Game Day comes around. It keeps you kind of going. It keeps you strung along a little bit until you get a little closer, at least to the next, like, pre-release season or the next product. I think it's in a good spot. What they're going to do, though, is they're going to move it to the end of the season. So now it's going to happen prior to, like, the reveal weeks and stuff for the set. So for Ixalan, in that example, the events for the Game Day or the Store Championship will now be December 30th, 31st. That is weird to me. First off, that's just a misstep, I think, from a point of view that you're having it happen during major holiday season, being New Year's Eve. A lot of people are on vacation, they're traveling, they're not going to be home close to their LGS necessarily, not to mention a lot of places in the winter months are tough anyway. Combine that with the fact that it's New Year's Eve, people could have other plans going on. So, I don't know. It seems like if you want to start something new and, like, get the word out about it, like, this seems like a strange time to start it. Maybe they should have waited one more set, even though I realize they want to start all this stuff with Ixalan. I don't know. It just seems really weird to me. Now, the other changes involved in this particular event, you'll find instead of getting what we used to get a promo and then a top 8 promo, there'll no longer be a top 8 promo, but everyone will still get a full art foil promo now. From the upcoming set. So you're getting something that's going to help encourage you to get excited about the next set, which I gotta ask, do you need that considering you're about to get into all the reveal weeks and everything? It feels like that hype train is already big enough. I don't know if this is going to add to it any, as opposed to I feel like it was doing more work at the beginning of the season from a business point of view, but I don't know. Something to think about. Secondly, they'll be giving out deck boxes and playmats. I'm assuming, from what it sounds like top 8 will get a deck box, and the winner will get the playmat like they normally get. But the art assets and everything from these products will be based on the upcoming set. So I guess that's kind of cool. The big news, though, Friday Night Magic. The promo cards, like you see on the screen if you're watching the video here, they're going away. So the ones you see are going to be the last ones. July, Reverse Engineer. August, Renegade Rallier, September, Fatal Push, starting with Ixalan, and they're going to coincide with the releases, it sounds like, of the actual sets. You are going to get a premium foil, double-sided token. Okay, instead of these. Now, everyone gets that, so I guess that's a plus, considering only 4 people typically, most LGSs, each Friday Night Magic would get one of these. Typically, what was recommended anyway, was the first and second place players get one, and then 2 people get them like randomly, like drawings or door prizes, what have you. But stores didn't have to do it that way, so stores did different things. But for the most part, that's what you're kind of used to seeing. Well, now everyone's going to get one of these foil tokens. The problem being, you're losing out on this other incentive. Now, what is Wizards' reasoning behind this? Let's talk about the reason they gave first, and then I'll give you kind of my theory on things. The reason they gave for this was they felt that they wanted to encourage more casual players to come to Friday Night Magic. And the feeling being, when you have things that are incentives for more experienced players to come and try to win and try to be a little more spiky, that wasn't exactly what they were looking for from this particular event. So I guess the idea of Friday Night Magic being a casual thing has started to turn into maybe more of a competitive thing, and they're kind of putting the blame on some of these promo cards. Now, as we know, promo cards have been hit or miss, right? We have had really good ones like Ether Hub, Fatal Push coming up, but we've had a lot of bad ones too. And I'll kind of give you my thoughts on that in just a second. But it is interesting to me that Friday Night Magic did start out as a very casual thing. I remember, like, early on, Friday Night Magic was an informal thing. It wasn't something Wizards even promoted, but a lot of game stores did, because they knew Friday night was the optimal time to get people in the store. They'd hold their events. They'd have prizes of their own. And Wizards kind of jumped on that after stores were already doing it and started adding support to it, especially when they took away the Players Reward program, which I thought was really awesome. But it was a way for them to say, well, we're going to move these rewards to somewhere else. The truth being, it was just way too intensive and expensive to mail out promos to people all the time. Like, you can't expect a big company to do that, especially as the game grew. So that went away, but okay, we got some other things like this, for example. But now this is going away, so it's yet another takeaway. It feels really weird. Here's my thought. I'm going to try to get in their head a little bit here. And like I said, I worked for a big entertainment company for a long time. I've seen this company do a lot of great things. I've seen this company make a lot of mistakes. I feel like I could write a book called Would Good Companies Make Bad Decisions, because I've seen my share of that. And I feel like this is one of those situations. I feel like they're making a poor call here based on information they have at hand that they're not necessarily completely fleshing out. And here's what I mean. I'm going to give you an example from my old work experience. I worked for a company that had an industrial engineering department. And industrial engineering, what they did was they were all about focusing in on things like efficiency and how fast you could process the amount of experiences you wanted to process. They were people that went to school, usually had math degrees, statistics and such, and they sat down and they just processed data. They looked at the data. Sometimes they would also be able to look at things like market research, compare that with the data that they find, but they're looking at numbers. They're looking strictly at numbers. And what my company that I worked with did really well was they did not go solely based on that. The role of an industrial engineer person was to actually process that information, look at the numbers, and then they would come to your local area and sit down and talk with you and say, all right, here's the deal. This is what I see in the numbers. Is this true? And if so, why do you think this is happening? Because what that did was the numbers only tell part of the story. You need the people with the boots on the ground really to tell you the other half of the story. In Magic's example, those are the LGSs. Those are the LGS owners. Those are the players. You need their feedback to kind of get the full picture. Because if you just go on data, money, math, marketing, research, what you get is an incomplete picture. And I feel like they're making a decision here, perhaps partially, on an incomplete picture. And here's what I mean. Let's say I'm a player in the last 6-8 months, maybe a year, who's filled out a marketing survey. When they start asking me about tokens, what has my experience with tokens been? My experience with tokens has probably been pretty good as a player. Now, there's different variants of that, but for the most part, when I think of these token experiences, these extra tokens they've thrown at me, I'm thinking about getting them in a pack instead of, say, maybe another ad card, right? In a pack of Modern Masters or something like that. I'm thinking about perhaps getting a foil double-sided promo in my pre-release pack. That was a cool add-on that I didn't get before. I'm thinking about the fat packs giving me a pack of new promo cards to play with, especially if I'm a limited player and I want to jump into limited and I don't want to use the cutout cards because they're kind of a pain and they're messy. So I like having this little pack to get started with. Promos are overall a very positive experience the way they've been presented to us over the last year. I'm probably going to have some positive things to say about them. Friday Night Magic promos. What if they asked me about those? Well, unfortunately, my experience probably wouldn't be as positive over the course of the last year. Recently, they've been knocking them out of the park with a couple of them, like Ether Hub, Fatal Push, so on. But there's been a lot of bad ones, and I think the overall general opinion is this program could be better. I don't think anyone wanted it to go away, but I think they want it to be better. Better selection of promos, maybe more of them, that type of thing. That's what players, I think, really would have wanted. That's what I would have wanted. Now, you process the data you get back when you ask people questions about these two things, and you look at those two buckets. Tokens becomes a very positive bucket for you, and Friday Night Magic promos become a very negative bucket for you. So somewhere in a boardroom, someone says, well, you know what? Tokens are rating high. Friday Night Magic promos are rating low. Why don't we just give everyone tokens? We'll give them what they want and give them something for participation, make it more casual, and we'll give them the thing that they seem to enjoy more than these particular promos. And I think that's where you start to go off the rails a little bit. Because as you can see from that example, what you're looking at is apples and oranges. You're taking data and you're not really matching it with the correlation. And that's when companies make mistakes. And I think this is partially what's happening here. Now, I think there's also a movement towards Wizards to think about how to get players to get more involved in different things as opposed to Friday Night Magic. If they want Friday Night Magic to be a casual experience, then how do you get maybe players that are trying to be a little more spiky, a little more hardcore to get involved in things like, for example, the open houses, bringing a new player in, because that is the most important thing to Wizards, and it should be. Growing the game is the most important thing to them. Players last for maybe an average of 7 years-ish, which is a lot for a game, but that's what they've said in the past. But in 7 years, if this entire player base turned around, they're out of business, right? If you don't bring new people in. So they can't afford to let that happen. Things like Magic Open House are incredibly important. So maybe giving better promos to something like that than a Friday Night Magic might be a strategy to try to grow the game. Problem is, there's a downside, because you're kind of alienating a lot of your people that are already in the game, and you may get that fall off to happen faster than 7 years, and that could be a problem. And if you're not appealing to them to go out there and do these open houses, then everything's kind of lost anyway. So, I don't know. It feels to me like a combination of trying to move things in a different direction. I'm not completely opposed to trying to make Friday Night Magic a little more casual, But I do think at the same time, casual players don't necessarily want to show up at Friday Night Magic and have events not fire, or maybe just have really small events of people that are all learning the game with no experienced people to help teach them things. Because how many times have you seen in Friday Night Magic, someone wins who's an experienced player, and they sit down with that player and they give them some advice on their deck, right? And that happens all the time in a lot of game stores, right? So that is important for people to get better and learn the game and actually become competitive and want to take it to the next step. And if you don't have that, you just have a bunch of new players sitting around beating each other with bad decks all the time, then you never grow and the game probably starts to get sort of boring. It definitely gets boring if your events can't fire. So the other thing they mentioned in the follow-up article was they did not see a correlation between the better promos and attendance at Friday Night Magic. So that's kind of weird. And on one side of their mouth, they're kind of saying, well, we want this to be casual. We don't want to encourage too many spiky players to come out and be super competitive here. But on the other side of their mouth, they're saying, well, that doesn't happen anyway, because when we had Ether Hub come out, we didn't have higher attendance. So that's a little weird. But beyond that, I think, again, you're comparing apples and oranges. Ether Hub came out during a time the standard was really low. People were really low on the format, on the game, which probably led to some lower attendance to Friday Night Magic. Had nothing to do with Ether Hub. Not to mention the fact that unless you're a hardcore player, you really don't know what is going on in the world of Friday Night Magic promos, right? So this isn't something they advertised or told new players, hey, come out, you're going to get a really good promo this week. You just didn't see that. The hardcore players knew because they follow these videos, right? They follow MTG Daily. They might see it on message boards. But the new players don't really have that same connection that maybe the more experienced players have. They don't even know, right? So, I don't know. It just feels like they're working on some maybe half-truths, some misinformation. I think they have a goal in mind, but I don't know if they know how to quite get there. And I feel like a lot of this stuff is going to get walked back in the next, few months. I just kind of have that feeling. This is one of those topics that Wizards is going to come back 6 months from now and be like, oh, we're making another big change and we're bringing back Friday Night Magic promos and making them better this time. So I don't know. I don't want to spend too much more time on this because I feel like everybody has, and you probably heard a million opinions on it at this point. I hope that I brought something new to the story, at least from my experience. Personally, just leave aside from kind of me trying to get in their head. Personally, I don't like it. I feel like it's a takeaway, and I don't like takeaways. Anything that can get more people playing the game, I think you should go for. And it's not a cost thing, obviously, because they're adding promos to other places. They're giving you more stuff than they ever gave you before, actually. They're just taking it away from here for some reason, right? So I feel like that's not necessary, and I don't think that's going to be a formula for success long term. So yeah, there you go. Let's move on to the next thing, and I won't spend a ton of time on this since we talked a lot about the promo cards. But I wanted to discuss the quality of some of the cards coming out of packs. The pictures you see on the screen, if you're watching the video, are a couple of pictures that I found on message boards. These are from Reddit, and just a couple different players that posted their cards they opened out of packs. And, these are new cards, and they're coming out warped. So the big story here, though, I think a lot of players aren't necessarily as upset at the fact that they're getting some warped cards or some bad print runs here and there, as they're upset that Wizards isn't really saying anything about it. They're not replying to the community. They're not putting out a message. They're not saying they're trying to fix this or work on it. So what is going on exactly with these things? Well, again, I'm going to try to get into their head a little bit and give you a point of view from a business and kind of tell you what I think's going on. There's a couple things that we've seen in the past from Wizards. Whenever they expand the amount of sets they're doing, which is happening right now. Obviously, you've heard all the announcements about new sets coming out. There's a ton of new product. But whenever that happens and they expand the game, expand their product line, the result is quality tends to dip. Sometimes it is temporary, but quality does tend to dip. The reason for that is because they're printing more stuff, they have to go to more printers. So they have a group of printers they may be very comfortable with, that have good parameters in place for quality control, as well as preventing leaks. And when they start expanding into new places, those parameters aren't necessarily in place yet. And that's why you see issues with quality and issues with leaks, I think. Now, sometimes they fix those problems as time goes on, and whether that's just giving up on that company and getting a new contract with somebody else eventually, or it's a situation where they help them get the right security and right quality control in place, they start to iron themselves out, typically is what we've seen. Good example of this, you go back to Modern Masters 2015. The print run for that set was horrible. A lot of damaged cards coming out, a lot of bad printings, bad foils, that type of stuff. So the issue there was they were adding a set and they were really looking to start expanding their product line beginning that year. And the result was you got a kind of poor product when it came to Modern Masters 2015 quality-wise, right? So that was a big issue for them. It did seem to get a little bit better after that. But now here we are again in another expansion period, and we're seeing warped cards, we're seeing bad print runs, bad cuts, bad print quality on cards, and again, the leaks are popping up all over the place again. So I find that pretty interesting. But the real question is, why isn't Wizards addressing this? Where are they coming from where they're just kind of ignoring this problem and hoping that it will go away is what it seems? Well, here's the deal. When you print something or you work with any outside company, whether that's a construction company, if you're building something or what have you for a big corporation, what you do is you get bids on your job. So if I'm going to build a new section to my business, a new wing to my building, for example, or if I'm going to print more Magic cards and I need to go to a new printer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bid out on the job. I'm going to say, this is what I need done. How much are you going to charge me to do it? And a number of companies will come out and they're going to compete and they're going to try to give you a lower price than the other companies. And when it's all said and done, you're going to have a list of prices. And guess what? Companies are going to go right to the bottom of that list and find the cheapest prices. Now, will they take necessarily the cheapest ones? Not always. They're going to look at a couple things. They're going to look at, first off, business ethics issues. They don't want to get involved in a company that has unfair labor practices or illegal labor practices, right? So they're going to try to vet that a little bit. Secondly, they're going to look at maybe some situations of really bad quality control. If they print some examples that are horrible, then they might say, look, we can't put this out as a product. But if it's passable and they don't have any ethics issues, they're going for the cheapest prices. The cheapest bids out there are where they're going. That's how businesses work. That's how it runs. And that's never going to change, right? So that's what I'm sure is happening with these printers. We need new printers. They put the word out. They come back. A bunch of places say, I can do that job for this much money. I can do this job for this much money. I can do it for this much money. They're going with the cheapest ones. Once they enter a contract with these people, that contract could be a period of time for maybe a year to 5 years. Who knows? So they could be tied up with a bad printer for perhaps an extended period of time. That might be one reason they're not talking about it. Another reason is simply because they have to be careful how they say that from a legal point of view, because you can't go out there and say, for example, hey, we're sorry about the card quality issues, but if you get packs that came from our printer in Southern California, Bob's Printing, then sorry, but those cards are not as best quality as maybe some of the others are. And then, of course, they're liable. Bob's Printing could turn around and sue them or what have you, so they can't really get into those specifics necessarily. So it puts them in a weird spot, because if the contracts they have are too long and they know they can't fix it in the short term, and also too, I mean, they've already probably printed Exelon, they've probably printed the next set, not to mention Iconic Masters. I mean, there's probably at least 3 sets that are already printed or in the process of being printed. So even if they could fix it after that, then it's still going to sound really weird to say, well, we fixed the problem, but you're going to have to deal with it for 3 more sets. So maybe you don't want to buy those sets. Maybe you want to wait for Dominaria to come out where we fix the problem. So that's not going to be really a good message for them to give either. So not saying anything, though, isn't the right answer either. I think they need to look at how to frame that to say, okay, we've seen the problems. People have sent us pictures and such. We've seen issues with card quality control. We are working on it. It may take some time. Have patience with us. Thank you for your patience. And we're going to put our time and effort to get this done. It might take a while. It might take some time. But it is on our radar. We know it exists. We're going to take steps. And that might be good enough, I think, for a lot of players just to hear that. I mean, some people still want to be happy with it, obviously. And I get it. I mean, you're spending your money. I mean, everyone works hard for their money. I mean, Think about the job you have that you go to every day and the work you put in, the time that you spend away from your family and your friends. I mean, that's personal. And you get money to live, and you take some of that money and you spend it on Magic for recreation. And if they're giving you a product that's not up to par, that's not cool, right? Like, that's not acceptable. And that's true anywhere we spend our money. So that is a big problem. Even if they did say what I just said, it's not going to solve everything. But at least I think a lot of players might feel, well, at least they're trying, they're looking at it. Some of these issues, even if they can't switch over to another printer anytime soon, they could be corrected just by their partnership with the printer, depending on how their contracts are written and stuff. If there are like quality control clauses, and I hope there are, they could come back and say, you know, this isn't really what you were promising us, or maybe this wasn't apparent in your samples, but we're having this issue. We need a better card stock. And if the contract is written well enough, then they should be able to work that out, or maybe even renegotiate the price if they had to. So I think that's what's going on behind this. And it's a lot more complicated than it feels like, because it feels like you should just be able to say, well, I'm paying $4 a pack, fix this. And I think they do want to fix this because they're competing with a lot of strong games out there, especially in the digital marketplace, because they don't have a good digital answer yet. Magic Online right now is not that. It can't compete with Hearthstone. It can't compete with other things going on out there. And that's a problem. Even in the paper card game world, I mean, there's things like Force of Will, Pokemon has been very popular again as of recently, of course. Final Fantasy. I mean, there's a lot of other options out there for players to get involved in. And Magic is going to find it harder and harder, I think, to hold that base if they make shortcuts like this, I guess. So from a business point of view, they have to know it's a problem, and I'm sure they're addressing it internally. It's just maybe a little bit of a misstep that they haven't said anything, and it might take them a little time to craft their message and get it right, and maybe that's what we're waiting for. So, I don't know. That's my thought on that one. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments on both those topics, but I want to move on to something positive. Let's talk about something good, because Magic's fun, right? It's not all about bent cards and missing promos. It's also about things like this past weekend's Star City Games Open in Cincinnati, which was awesome. Fantastic Standard Open, and it really gave me hope for the future of the format in this particular meta. A lot of diversity, a lot of really cool decks, things we haven't seen before, but also mixed in with some things we have seen before. But everything felt fair and balanced. I really liked the beginnings of this meta. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself too early. I know that next week, the week after the Pro Tour, all that's going to happen. And maybe 5 weeks from now, we're going to be back in a situation where the format is just solved and there's only like 2 viable decks. I really hope that's not the case, though, because this is starting out to be awesome, and I hope this is the trend that we see. I think a healthy standard format is 4 or 5 competitive decks. I think 5 is a excellent format. You have to remember that it's not going to be Modern, right? Modern is super healthy right now. So Modern's amazing. That's a topic for another day. But you're not going to quite see that level of diversity considering the card pool is much smaller, right? But even with the card pool being smaller, this is a still large standard card pool we're in right now. So I would expect to see some good diversity in decks. That's what we saw this week. I mean, if you look at the top 8 here, I'll just start from 8 and work our way up. Teamer Energy, an old favorite, is still there. Mono Black Zombies, another old favorite. I was a little surprised that this one did as well as it did because we saw a ton of board sweeps. I mentioned this in my video the other day, but we saw everything from Radiant Flames making a comeback in some decks to Sweltering Suns. We saw Bantu's Last Reckoning. We saw Hour of Devastation. We saw Fumigate. So some of these small creature decks, you would imagine, would have a hard time standing up to that. But this one made it. I mean, still came in 7th. A little surprised that the Dimir zombie decks didn't do a little bit better. They were lower on the standings. They were running the Scarab God. I thought that would be a little more resilient to some of these board sweeps, but maybe it was a little too slow. I don't know. It just didn't do as well. That's definitely something to watch. Maybe that deck gets tweaked or changed a little bit over the next few weeks. Number 6, it finally happened. Mono Red Aggro. I've been saying for the last 2 metas, I feel like it's about time for Mono Red Aggro to make a comeback. Coming in 6th here. At 5th and also 2nd place, we got the Zorius Monument deck. What was cool about that deck is it looked really resilient to a lot of the board sweeps. It had things like Selfless Spirit. It had the Dust Till Dawn, which could bring stuff back from the graveyard. The weakness was it had sometimes a hard time putting pressure on planeswalkers, and especially if there was a control shell behind them. So more on that in just a second. Coming in 4th place, Black-Green Energy. So another classic deck that's kind of been around with maybe some new twists to it. 3rd place, 4-color Emerge. So an Emerge deck doing well, and it actually looked pretty sweet on camera. The Monument deck, of course, coming in 2nd. And then 1st place was a 4-color Control deck, which really felt like a Super Friends deck, but it played like a Control Shell Super Friends, and it was tough for the Monument deck to beat that because it couldn't put the pressure on the Planeswalkers fast enough, especially with the control elements holding it back. So that's really where that deck kind of excelled, especially in the finals. You can see that matchup happen. So awesome stuff. I will say we saw a lot of different decks, a lot of variety. As far as big cards this week for me, a Braid was huge. Basically, any deck running red was running a Braid. And aside from the top 8, there were some other decks out there that still did well, like some of the control decks, like the Izzet Control, some of those older style control decks. But they're going to have to rethink, I think, Torrential Gearhulk in the future, because a Braid is just that abrasive to them. I also kind of wonder if energy decks, since they did have a good showing this weekend, might have some trouble in the future if people start putting Solemnity in their sideboards to board in. I think that could be an issue for those decks going forward. So the meta is definitely going to change and be crafted a little bit. Another big card I saw this weekend was Champion of Wits. It looked awesome on camera. I mean, being able to, for 3 mana, play a 2/1, which is a nice little blocker. Also, if it gets swept away, you don't care because they Eternalize. You get to loot twice when it comes into play, then bringing it back later for 7, especially if you have a slower, grindier build. Bringing this card back, draw 4, discard 2, and have a 4/4 body. It was real sweet. So those 2 cards really were big standouts for me. Hour of Devastation is another one that I felt like was a great board sweep. It did deal with Planeswalkers. Like, I feel like if that Azorius Monument deck could splash a little red and play Hour of Devastation even out of the board, it could have dealt better with the Planeswalker pressure, perhaps. I think more players will be playing Hour of Devastation next week and the week after, as opposed to maybe Fumigate and some of the others, just because of the Planeswalker aspect. I also think it's possible that Bolas might get a little better. Bolas saw a little bit of play here and there. There's 1 copy in the winning deck, actually. But if a lot of people start running Hour, Bolas maybe gets a little bit better. So there's going to be a lot of shifts, a lot of changes going on with the format going forward, no doubt. But I'm excited at what we've seen so far. Really cool start. Really happy to see where we're going, the direction we're going in with this. And also in the future, I think I have high aspirations for what Standard's going to become, especially hiring this new team to focus on Standard. We're not going to see those results probably for a little while, of course, because they're just putting that team in place now. And I'm sure they're working ahead probably like a year or so. But once that starts to hit, I think we're going to see some really amazing things from the Standard format going forward. So that's awesome. That's definitely Wizards doing the right things at the right times. Yeah, we've had a couple bad metas, sure. But I think they're starting to maybe pull out of it. And, I really hope I'm not overselling it and then 2 weeks from now, one deck dominates everything. But I don't think so. I think there's enough answers in the format now between cards like Fatal Push, Hour of Devastation, Unsummon even. A lot of good answers to the problems that come out there. Braid, super universal answer, deals with Gearhulks exceptionally well as other things. Alright, having said that, that is the show for this week. And I'd like to thank everyone for hanging out with me, talking about some Magic. We haven't got to do this in a while, and I kind of missed it. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful, and definitely let me know in the comments below your thoughts. Till next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.